Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is Nick from SwordScan, which is a new. Well, hello, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm sorry.
So SwordScan, I was just going to finish the sentence, is a new tool for the TAO Bittensor ecosystem. Yes? Did I get that correct?
Yes, you did. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to give people a way to view these subnets in a way that's not, through on-chain data. So our philosophy really is what's being the most talked about, who's building what, and just to give you kind of an outlook on, just things that you're not going to see from staring at a chart or looking at, TAO stats or TAO market cap, just kind of real things that people, play into and what you see kind of on the social media side.
Yeah, so sort of like a sentiment guide to what is going on inside of the TAO ecosystem. But let's back up a little bit because I think a lot of people who watch the show may or may not understand what subnets are, what TAO is. Let's just sort of set the stage. So you and I live and breathe this Bittensor TAO world and have been for the last 8 weeks or so, maybe 9 weeks since dTAO subnet tokens have gone live. But let's sort of set the stage. So Bittensor is basically this AI incubation meets blockchain thing where the blockchain, the TAO blockchain, the Bittensor blockchain is emitting TAO tokens, which are useful within this AI ecosystem and can be used to buy subnet tokens. And subnets are like these little AI companies that are forming inside of the TAO ecosystem. And they're sort of like the open source versions of things which exist in the real world, the VC-backed AI world, that are valued in the hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. And these subnets that we're seeing arise in the TAO ecosystem, they have anywhere, the highest is I think now worth about 50 million with an M. And the lowest is like, 25K. Right. So these subnets, and there's not quite 100 of them yet, but it's getting close to it. Would you tell me if you think I got that right? What would you like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that you pretty much nailed it on the head. And like you said, we're both, kind of in this realm, so we understand it a little bit more. And, when I try to explain it to people and they tell me flat out, I just don't understand this. There's this one analogy that I give. And I think I saw this in like a YouTube video. It's a very high level analogy on the whole, whole system and the whole, ecosystem and the way things work. So the way that I kind of look at it is you could picture the miners so basically it consists of the subnet, right? Which is in reality a company. Then within the subnets, there's validators and then there's the miners. And the way that it works is, and the way that I like to explain this to people in like a very easy to digest way is miners are the people doing the work and the validators are administering a specific task. So if you have, a subnet that's focusing on, let's just say like Bitcoin price predictions, for instance, the validator is going to say, okay, what are your predictions? The miners are going to give the answer and then the validators check it and they make sure, okay, miner 1 was the closest, miner 2 was the second closest, miner 3 was the third closest, and then they reward based on that. So it's kind of like you said, it's more of like incentive driven to drive or to find a result. But I just think to the outside world, it's a very complex, concept to wrap your head around. And even me still, as someone who's in this and like loves learning about it, it's still for me a lot to digest.
Yeah, I describe it as the Hunger Games. I've called it that on a couple different episodes. So each subnet is its own Hunger Games, right? And the miners are the contestants in the Hunger Games. They're the ones that are trying to stay alive and kill all the other contestants. And the validators are the judges of the Hunger Games that are awarding points to the contestants. And at the end of each round, so you said predict the price of Bitcoin. So whichever of the Hunger Games contestants got the closest wins the prize for that round, and the judges are the validators who collectively decide who came the closest, right? So
Exactly.
So it's incentive driven. It is a contest. It is a market, even within the subnets, right? And then all the subnets are competing against each other in sort of a wider Bittensor TAO wide Hunger Games to achieve the greatest valuation and market cap for their particular subnet in subnet alpha tokens, right? So as we said earlier, Chutes is currently the number one on the charts, currently clocking in with a $50 million market cap. So they get, last time I checked, it was like 17 or 18% of all TAO emissions, right?
Yeah,
so
they are just absolutely killing it. It is, as someone who's, I know both of us have been watching this unfold since, I think, when did it go live? Like February 13th. Just watching their run has been insane.
Yeah.
It's for those who don't really understand it, the way it works is the higher, I think it's the higher the valuation, the more emissions you get. And they've just been on a steady climb straight up.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking at the charts right now. So the entire subnet market cap is currently sitting at 270 million, which is amazing because just a few weeks ago it was like 50 million.
Yeah.
Right.
And what I even find super crazy about this whole thing is, I made the analogy of these subnets are companies, but you have these subnets that are achieving these amazing, amazing results. And the total value of all, I think what is there now, like 87 or 88? The total value of all 88 is 250 million. There is coins on other chains that are, double that value. So it really just goes to show you that you're still very early in finding out about this and, potentially getting some of your funds into it. And it just goes to show you that the quality of the work being produced and, the achievements that these companies are doing is severely undervalued.
Yeah, I would agree. It's completely severely undervalued. Let's talk about Chutes for just a second here, because I don't fully understand what I'm reading here, but maybe you do, and you can explain it to me. So Rayon Labs, which is the company behind Chutes, it says over the last few days, Chutes has been growing exponentially, adding 15,000 new users in the last 24 hours. We're also on track to hit over 30 billion tokens processed today alone. So let's focus on the tokens process. So what is that? And we don't mean like crypto tokens. We mean AI tokens, right? So tell us this. Do you understand the significance of that number?
I do and I don't, because to my understanding, the tokens process is like when you prompt these models and you ask it a question and it's, outputting a response that uses tokens. So it's basically, you could think of it as a payment. So what I take that as is that it's it's like a way to gauge the amount of, inputs that Chutes and these models are processing. And so a lot of it is, it's basically a way to gauge how popular is their platform becoming.
Yep.
But
okay.
So with this 30 million, and to my understanding it's predominantly all through Open Router, which is a free website that you can use to access all these models or providers of these models. I've played around with it a little bit. If I'm using these models, I typically still use ChatGPT just because it's what I'm most used to.
Yeah.
But so what they do is they offer like a plethora of models and they're just constantly adding to it every day, which is kind of the reason that they're reigning supreme in this category.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So let me bring up Backdrop Finance for a second, because this is sort of the coin market cap, at least for me, of this universe. I like your interface also, but I also like this one. It's a little easier to see.
Backprop is great.
Yeah. So here's the total market cap, 270 million. Chutes is currently clocking in at 50 million. Targon is like roughly half that, right? At 26 million is the next most popular. Then there's Gradients, Templar, Proprietary Trading Network, Vision, Nova, which is, we had them on the show. They're hunting pharmaceutical molecules. And you see the valuations go down as we move down the chart. Now Hippias at, roughly 3 million. That's basically the Bittensor version of Filecoin, if you will. So, Filecoin is worth whatever it's worth. I haven't checked it recently, but, I think it's in the billions. Hippias is the same thing, but it's worth 3 million, right? So that is sort of typical of the differential that we're seeing between the venture-backed stuff and the Bittensor subnet stuff. So pretty interesting. Let me see if I can go to Chutes' website here. Hang on, let me see. Here we go, Chutes.ai. Okay, so this is the Chutes website. So you can see, basically sign up to deploy your own serverless AI code. So they basically are hosting all these models, and you can just run them, and it's free.
Yeah.
Right. So why would Chutes set these things up if it's free? They're not making any money, right? So, and the answer is,
I like was really
because they're earning TAO
too.
tokens. That's why, right? Like they're getting subsidized effectively by the network. It's like basically there's a Bitcoin, but instead of mining, instead of guessing the hash of the previous block, you're creating these AI products. And if you are deemed to be the best at what you're doing, you earn Bitcoin. Except it's not Bitcoin; it's TAO. But that's basically the idea, and it's totally working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is, and it's funny because I really was trying to understand the other day. I was like, how are they, making money from these models? And it's because they're just killing it emission wise, and they're bringing in, a significant chunk of the emissions, which means that they're getting the funds that they need to, run this and effectively make it, what it is. And, I think too, they also have gradients, which is inference and model training. And then they have 19, which I don't quite understand fully what it's for, but I know it plays into, the whole narrative of all three and what they're trying to use all three to create like these killer agents. But I think it's more so the fact that they're going to try and monetize that new squad platform that they just came out with, which, by the way, I don't know if you've had the chance to take a look at it. I haven't had the chance to use it, but I've been seeing people talking about it. Apparently it is insane.
Yeah, I've not had a chance to use it, but I have seen the posts about it. Can you explain what is it in your understanding, and why are people talking about it so much?
Yeah, so essentially what it is it's a no-code agent builder. And what they're trying to accomplish is that you'll be able to set up an agent, which is essentially AI to it's essentially AI to accomplish any single specific task that you want it to. So you can have it trained on being, like a basketball statistician, or you can have it trained on being your personal, resume builder, something like that. But what they're doing is they're taking all three of their subnets and they created a no-code platform. So you could say, okay, I want my agent to be, its text output to be from DeepSeek. So you drop the DeepSeek in, and then I'm going to train models using gradients with this data set, and you drop that in, and then you take something from 19 and you incorporate it that way. And then there's all these other things that go into it, but it's essentially, creating something that 3 years ago would have taken somebody 3, 4, 5 weeks to code out in like probably 10 minutes.
Yeah, so any idiot, and by that I mean me, can come along and without having to know any programming skills whatsoever, it's sort of like Squarespace. I can just sort of tell it what I want, and it gives it to me, and I go, that's mostly right, but fix this, and I can just talk to it with English, and that's sort of how it works.
Yeah, I mean, to my understanding, that's pretty much how it works. I tried to get access to the beta, but I think my messages just probably got lost in, all the commotion, so don't have access to it. But when they make it public, I'm very excited to get my hands on it, because I think that I could personally leverage it for what I'm building in terms of SwordScan and Shogun. And, I think that having that inference and that output capability is going to be great just to have, because, I would say that I'm like semi-coherent in the whole agent building. My background's mostly in Python, but, when it comes to AI, I'm learning as I go, and just having that, ease of use, no code, drag and drop, give it the data and it knows it.
Yeah.
I think that's something it's going to be really useful for a lot of people.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'm a software engineer by training, but I'm woefully out of step with the modern coding and especially the AI stuff. I mean, I understand it sort of at a gut level, but so this sort of thing appeals to me quite a bit as well. And I know that Fred Krueger, who's a friend of mine, has been using AI to code like crazy, and he's sort of like from the same era in terms of actually from when he last actually wrote code, and he's going gangbusters. He's creating all kinds of stuff. It helps to have the engineering background to sort of understand under the hood what's going on. But you don't need to, you no longer need to know all the sort of ins and outs of, how to set up this thing in Docker or whatever the fuck on AWS. The AI just deals with all that nonsense for you, and debugging, it just does it. Right. So it's really nice. So
yeah, no, I was just gonna add one thing too. That's it's really crazy for me because, I mean, my background and my degree is primarily in development, and I was kind of going through college throughout this whole rise of the ChatGPT and all this stuff, and all these tools were coming out as I was like basically exiting my college career, and it's just funny to see that the quality of output that I was producing as a developer and as a programmer from before these tools to, then getting my hands on it, figuring out how to use it, and then after was just astronomical. And it's funny to see because, every day you think that it's getting better and better, and it truly is. So,
yeah. Okay, well, let's shift gears now and talk a little bit about SwordScan. So to set the stage, we have this 270 million market cap universe of roughly 100 things whose real world counterparts have valuations in the hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. And the thesis here is that the TAO universe is currently, it's sort of a weird little universe. It's hard to get into. It's hard to understand. It has its own wallets. It's not like on Solana or something. It's in its own little strange little universe they have to kind of learn the ins and outs of. But we think it won't be that way for much longer. We think that probably subnet tokens will start appearing on centralized exchanges. We think that there'll be wrap tokens on other places. And once the world sort of clues into this, everything, and this is not financial advice, but it is my opinion that this whole universe will like overnight 10x at least. And so and if you pick the right subnets, some of those will be 100x, some of those will be 500x, we think. So I think that's my opinion, not financial advice, just so we all are very clear. So, but I do think that's what we're looking at. And you made this tool SwordScan, which helps people like me who are investors sift through the 100 or so subnets to figure out which of those to invest in. So tell us, what is SwordScan and how does it work?
Yeah, so it's essentially a subnet, Mindshare, and data aggregation platform. And what I do is I take a bunch of data, primarily from X, Twitter, and I scrape it all from these subnet accounts. The ones that are active and posting and running Twitter accounts. I scrape all this data. I scrape interactions, retweets, likes, comments on the posts. And I wrote a couple algorithms to grade them on, who's getting the most interaction, who's being seen the most, what are people talking about. And through these algorithms, I was able to grade all of them and give them a score that's actively changing and updating. And so what I'm really trying to accomplish is showing people what's being the most talked about. Because, like we say in this realm, it's really hard to keep up with everything. There's a million things going on at once. This subnet just launched this and they just changed that. And, it's really hard to keep up with the times, essentially. So what I'm trying to do is make it a lot easier for people to stay in the know, if you will.
Yeah, so you've built sort of a sentiment analyzer that sort of scans the universe, sees which subnets people are tweeting about, posting about, whether they're saying good things or they're saying bad things. Is the sentiment positive or is it negative? And sort of aggregating that and showing like a heat map of who's being talked about the most, right? So do you want to give us a little demo so people can see this visually?
Yeah, of course. So this is the front page, and what we have here is basically a heat map, and it's not really showing right now just because I'm on my laptop, but these boxes are actually pretty dynamic in size, and so it ranks them. Chutes right now is number one, Gradients is two, all these, the Rayon labs, are within the top
Yep.
five. And it just essentially is a way to show people, like I said, what's being talked about the most. So, like, as you can see, one of the Masa subnets, it's not, these are primarily in the lower ranks, but, they get good interaction on their posts and they're pretty well known. So it's going to be up here.
Yeah, Massa. I mean, I've watched Massa on this chart for a while. So Massa is consistently in the top 10 in terms of sentiment, which means apparently a lot of people are talking about them. But their ranking in the as far as market cap goes has not been sort of that high, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of a weird Like, I don't understand why that is, but I've noticed that as well.
It's really interesting for me to see too, because when you look into these kinds of things, you see that I think that they have the fourth highest engagement rank out of all the subnets, but it's just pretty crazy to see that they're pretty overlooked in terms of investor confidence and their chart. So, but
yeah, so that would indicate maybe an opportunity that there's a lot of sort of mind share. Yeah, so that's so looking at this, you might be seeing the future. It might not be masses might not be that high today, but it might be tomorrow because there's a lot of attention that's on it.
Yeah, so then you can toggle between showing 10, 15, or 20.
I did not know that, actually.
Yeah, I primarily go on the 20 view just to, kind of see who's going in and out and, some of the names that are kind of more like overlooked. But so then here we also have integrated charts to show the gainers and the losers.
Let's go back to the bubble map or the heat map for a second, because I want to talk about some of these. So we've talked about Chutes. Chutes is in the number one position, both on the charts and in your sentiment indicator. So that matches up perfectly, right? So
yeah.
And Gradients is made by the same company that makes Chutes, and Gradients is sort of like one of the component pieces of a 3 subnet product, if you will. So it being in the number 2 position also makes sense. Bitmind detects, whether something is an AI fake or not. So I do hear a lot about that one, and that one actually is in the top 5 or 6 or something like that. So that also maps up. Nova, we've had on the show here, and they do the pharmaceutical molecule hunting, and so that them being at number 5, that also makes sense. What is Synth? I keep hearing about Synth number 50. Do you know what that one is?
Yeah, so that actually popped up on my radar. When was I was tweeting about them like 2 days ago. So Synth actually is run by this company Mode, and Mode themselves is an L2 that's focused on like decentralized AI and the whole agent ecosystem, but it's built on top of, I think, Optimism or Blast. I'm not sure I think it's Optimism. So they're built on top of Optimism. And it's funny because when I was making this website and I had to go on and find, the Twitter accounts for all 80 so subnets, I came across Synth and I found out that it was Mode. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, why is this, overlooked? But recently, like 3 days ago, they started tweeting about their subnet, and from my understanding, they're shifting a lot more focus onto it, and they're going to start building on it and like updating it to be more detail focused. So through that and through the interaction that they've been getting on their content related to their subnets, it jumped all the way up from, I think they were like 40th or 50th Mindshare wise, all the way up to 14, because also too, the chart went from like 250,000 market cap to now they're sitting right under 1 million, and people started talking about it more.
So they 4X'd.
Interaction. Yep.
They 4X'd. Yeah.
So
it's okay. So that's there.
Yeah. So it's pretty crazy to see too. I watch these changes happen in real time just from, a subnet will tweet something like a big announcement, and you could just see they go from like 25th to 22nd up to 17. And then if they're big enough and they have a big enough following, they'll jump into the top 10. It's really cool, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And this right here is sort of how you can get a little peek around the corner to see, who's going to zoom up the chart next. And I have seen that happen a couple times. So Templar is also another pretty interesting one. I know that Const, who's the one of the founders of Bittensor and sort of the leading, the Satoshi, if you will, of the Bittensor universe, he's been tweeting about it. And Templar it's decentralized training, right? So the way I understand it, so normally you need a giant number of GPU in a data center, NVIDIA chips, to create a new frontier model of AI. But most people don't have access to that number of chips, right? Only Elon does, or only Microsoft does, or only Amazon does. But Templar comes along and says, well, what if in aggregate we all contributed our little tiny GPUs? Together we could make one giant honking AI cluster which can do training as if we were Elon or as if we were Amazon, right? Sort of in that almost the same way Bitcoin's mining network in aggregate is the world's largest supercomputer, right? So sort of the same idea. Pretty interesting. Do you have any comments on Templar?
Yeah, I really do actually like what they're doing, and I think that what they're achieving is very good for the broader ecosystem. And just through my research, I've realized that if they're actually able to, I mean they are, but if they become mainstream like they intend to be, that whole process of linking computers together to create that one big network to train the AI is going to be massive. And I think too it really goes to show with a lot of these subnets that their goal is to be a mainstream and get to the attention of the broader masses like a Web2 company would. And as for me and you who know a lot of this information and are constantly doing research, it's hard to think how have they not achieved that yet. But I think that Templar is definitely among the 10, 15 or so that actually could get to that point.
Yes, I think there are 10 or 15 of these that could become absolutely enormous. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, from what I'm seeing so far. So, okay. So let's dive into the rest of the functionality of the SwordScan site. Take us on a little tour.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll jump into Templar. So when you go to a specific subnet, you're greeted with an overview page. That's, a chart. Mm-hmm. You have the price, market cap, pool statistics that show, how much alpha and how much tau are actually in the pool. And this is something too that I think a lot of people don't really understand yet about the subnets is it's essentially the same thing as a Uniswap liquidity pool. The more tau in the pool, the easier it'll be on the big cells. And as people are swapping their alpha or their tau for alpha, it's adding to the pool. So typically you see the higher ranks with way more tau in the pool than alpha, or not than alpha, but.
Let me explain something for the people who don't know about how this works exactly. So in the Bittensor universe, there is only one AMM where you can buy subnet tokens. And that AMM, that Uniswap-like environment, is actually part of the Bittensor TAO chain. Like, it's not like an app on top of the chain. It is the chain. And the chain itself sets up the liquidity pools when a new subnet is launched, when a new subnet is born, and it emits alpha tokens in a very small quantity at first, right? And TAO tokens into the pool. And that's how the new subnet is born. And in order to buy subnet tokens, you must have TAO tokens and you must interact with this pool and this exchange. There's only one. You can't go. There's nowhere else you can go to buy subnet tokens today. And we think some stuff, we'll talk about what we think is coming later. But right now, today, that's how it works. And even the stuff that comes later, we'll have to ultimately do this under the hood. So far, so good? Yeah.
And I think too, something that also is a pretty big fact that needs to be acknowledged in terms of these pools is when people register new subnets, there's really nothing in the pool, and each day a little bit more of alpha gets emitted into the pool. So that's why you'll see a subnet get registered, and trying to buy 5 tau worth is going to give you like a 30% slippage because there's nothing in the pool to account for that. And that's why you see these massive candles day one, and you're just like, oh my God, these people, they don't know what they're doing. But it's funny to watch as somebody, not funny, but these people are like losing their money. But it's just a whole system that is.
It's designed. So basically, it seems designed to defeat whales coming in. We find. Imagine if you or I knew about a new subnet, we knew it was going to be another Chutes. right? And let's just say it's subnet 101. It doesn't exist, but let's just say that's what it is. We know it's going to be the next Chutes. You and I have a big giant pile of TAO. We'd like to just own as much of it as possible. We can't because because the liquidity is so tiny in the beginning that nobody can go in there and buy a lot of it without incurring insane slippage. Like, you know, be like, okay, I'd like to buy 1 TAO's worth. Oh, slippage is 400%.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like there's no way to acquire a lot, right? So,
and it honestly too, it's a good system, I will say, because it really it does prevent that.
It defeats the whales, so everybody has a fair shot. That's what it's designed to provide. It's a fair launch. Everybody gets an equal opportunity. It's actually quite cleverly designed to enhance that, and I like that. It's good, well designed. Okay.
So under that, we have emissions, which I'm actually in the process of adding right now. I don't think these are up-to-date values. I'm writing the scripts to get this all, worked in. But, within a day or two, that will be live.
Can we go back up there to 2.4%? What is 2.4%? What is that, daily?
No, that's these are, I think it actually is daily. Yeah, I think this actually is daily, but I have the values incorrect because this is work in progress. Work in progress. Got it. No, because the reason I asked that is because I've actually calculated out my own holdings. My observation this was like 3 weeks ago, was that subnets were effectively emitting 2.5% per day into the pools, into the liquidity pools. So if you were a holder of that particular subnet token, you're getting diluted at a rate of 2.5% per day, which sounds like, oh my God, I'm going to get, if you add that all up in a month, that's, 75% dilution, right? Just from the chain emitting tokens into the liquidity pool, which sounds horrific until you realize that the valuations are so absurdly, ridiculously low, the market caps of all of these subnets, that, are they going to go up more than 75% per month? Well, they have so far quite a bit more. So it appears defeating that flood of dilution is very, 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 very possible. And in fact, very likely at this particular instant in dTAO's subnet token history. Yes. No, I tend to agree. I tend to agree for about, 90%, but there are those subnets that aren't getting as much to counter.
Yeah, some subnets suck.
Counteract that, but yeah. So after the overview, this is really like the bread and butter.
Yep.
The Mindshare section. So what this is hold on, let me move this right here. So as we could see, from about 24 hours ago to now, just the change in their interaction and how they've been performing social media wise. And, like I said before, I'm constantly scraping this data. It's constantly rerunning the algorithms and changing and updating values. And you could just see that, maybe right here when it peaked, they posted something new and a lot of people were commenting or people were mentioning them, and it's just, or, potentially right here when they dropped off, maybe another subnet that was fairly close was posted something else, and they're just getting more of that space and that, word of mouth from other people. So it's
this is number of tweets with sentiment analysis built in.
Yeah, so it's tweets interact. So it's not actually sentiment really based. It's more so based on the amount of tweets, the amount of interactions, and the amount of visibility that they're getting.
Okay, so it's sort of like a page rank. It's like how much action are they getting, and it could be negative too. People could be ripping on it, but that would still be positive mind share because it's in people's minds. It's kind of like when Howard Stern, like, have you ever seen the movie with Howard Stern? I don't know if you probably haven't. Anyway, Howard Stern became this very popular shock jock in New York. And they couldn't figure out like why he was so popular. And they had like a pollster go out and ask people who listened to him, like, why, even people who hated him, they're like, well, why do you listen to him if you hate him? And they're like, we want to see what we have to know what he's going to say next. Right. Because they want to hear what he has to say next so they can get mad at him. But that was still engagement, and it was still monetizable to Howard Stern. It benefited Howard Stern, even to have people who hated him. Right. Even though it was like half the audience. So I feel like this is sort of the same thing. It's the Howard Stern effect. Yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of plays into like, the all publicity is good publicity kind of narrative too.
Yeah.
So apart from this bigger chart right here, these smaller charts on the side, also kind of show their relevance. This isn't this. So like this market cap is not really a price chart. It's more so it's rank market cap wise. So, Chutes Templar's been holding this 18.6 million, hovering in this range for quite some time now. That's why we don't really see too much movement on this chart. It's really just, these are kind of ways to just show the fluctuations in movement. The Twitter chart right here too is, kind of a bar on, maybe here, in this long one, they're posting tweets. Again, it's just really all a way to measure activity, word of mouth, and who's talking about what. And so down here.
Sorry, go back up for just a second. So, 90 rank is 96 out of 100. 96 what? It's
the inverse. So they're actually ranked 4. But,
got it. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
So why does it say 96? Is it just
because but the way that I designed the algorithm, it scored like it like inverse scored them just to make sense with the other ways that I'm scoring it. So like volume here, for example, they're getting the 4th most volume, but out of 100, they're graded 96.
Okay, so it's actually sort of the opposite of what you think. Okay, for your own internal data reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and what does 37 out of 100 mean?
That means that out of a score of 100, they ranked 37th, or their score calculated to 37 in terms of engagement.
Okay, got it. So it's not like relative. It's not like they're 37th. It's that they scored 37 out of 100 on your engagement ranking criteria map.
Yeah. So the way that the algorithm works is when I feed in all this data, I told it, or I programmed it to, I said, rank their engagement and grade it out of 100, but in relevance to the other subnets and their X accounts and their engagement. So it takes the relevance, it looks at Templar, and it says, okay, compared to all these other big guys, they're not getting that much. So, it's calculated based on relativity. Okay. And I do have what's the word I'm looking for? I do have like counterparts in there to, account for those subnets that have 200,000 followers, as opposed to an account like Templar, who probably only has, like 1,000, 1,500. So it grades it. It takes that into account too.
Oh, okay. So the more popular accounts will get ranked higher, if you will.
Well, to an extent, yes. But the way that it's programmed and the way that it's graded is to account more, to take actual follower count less into consideration, more so, likes, comments, retweets, all that kind of stuff.
So engagement is the highest scoring thing of all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last kind of thing we have on this page is, let me just connect my wallet here.
This is is the premium access already open, by the way?
One of the things is the terminal is not.
Okay.
So this is a premium feature that went live a little while ago. Ooh. It's a way to check the holder count and pricing.
Yeah, well, let's go back up to that because this is pretty cool. I remember I remember you used to have this open and free, and then you put it behind the firewall for the Shogun token holders, of which I am one, by the way. So I'm glad that this is now back being available. So the shrimps, dolphins, and whales, you can see, and a whale is defined as what? As somebody who holds 100 tokens?
I think no, it's over $10,000 in token valuation.
Alpha tokens, that is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So over 10K. So if you hold $10,000 worth of alpha tokens, you're a whale. And if you own
shrimps is 0 to 1,000, dolphin is 1,000 to 10,000, and then whales are 10,000 plus.
Got it. Okay. So it's 186 people that own more than $10,000 worth of Templar.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. This is really good to know.
Mm-hmm. And then just right here, there's a chart of the holder count. So you could see that, today they're actually up 5%. So it kind of reflects on this chart right here too a little bit. And then this pie chart is distribution by balance of the tokens in circulation.
Wow. So it's like 90% whales.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So that's a lot. So the big money's here in Templar, which doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah. This subnet's gotten a lot of
then-
action from Const and some other big brains in the Bittensor ecosystem. So yeah, not surprised.
You know, it's actually funny that, so I've really noticed with just looking at this whole thing is, and this feature specifically is, the higher the rank, you know, the more amount of the supply and circulation is held by whales. And, you know, that kind of plays into the fact of, like we talked about before, with the alpha being emitted into the pool and the dilution, and, you know, Templar, who's obviously been in the game and tradable since launch, they have a fair amount of their alpha in the pool already, and they're a pretty high rank. So, you know, you're seeing these buys of like 35,000, 50,000, like 70,000 all come in one go. Whereas a smaller subnet is obviously not going to be getting that, and it's more fairly distributed.
Yeah, makes sense, right? I mean, so it's more fairly launched. So basically, in the early days, the shrimps and the dolphins have a much better shot of getting in and getting a decent chunk, which might turn them into a whale if they just hold on to it, right?
You know,
like
if you pick the right one, you play your cards right,
yeah. So that makes sense.
And then this down here is, you know, something that I use all the time. So it's essentially a chart of the price overlaid against the three groups of token holders. So you can really see, you know, who's affecting the chart. So I can, you know, turn these off and I can see, you know, whales are pretty overlaid on this. But, you know, like right here, a couple whales sold off, and then, you know, a few more bought. And it's just a way to kind of see, you know, who's moving their money around. You know, is something in redistribution right now where a lot of whales selling off? Is it really, like, who's driving price, you know?
Yeah. That's really interesting. I didn't know about this. I'm going to use this from now on. That's good.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see too. Like, I've noticed this a lot when price starts going up, you know, usually it's the shrimps that are selling off along the way and taking their profit, as you can see here.
Yes.
It's really cool, and I it's really neat, and it's honestly helped me, you know, get some good entries on a lot of subnets.
Well, let's talk about that. So are we done with the demo basically?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm working on the terminal, which I don't want to say too much about right now, but just know that's coming soon.
So tell me an instance where you've used your own tool to get an early entry on something because of something that you noticed, perhaps even that chart you just showed us.
Yeah. So
I know you've got several examples of this because I've seen you tweet. So
yeah,
I just don't remember what they are offhand.
I'm trying to think of like the best one. Honestly, you know, I really did. I got really good entry on shoots on my shoots entry because of this. You know, I noticed that there were a couple whales that were selling off and driving the price down, but at the same time, you know, you're seeing just that purple line of like the shrimps and some of the dolphins just going exponentially up and up and up. And I was watching it for like 4 or 5 hours, and they're just increasing, but the chart's still going down. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is, you know, probably a good time to grab some, because as, you know, supply goes from one holder to 15, it spreads it out more. Everybody knows that's, you know, typically bullish. And, you know, you often see moves up after that kind of accumulation and redistribution. And I remember seeing it, and I'm sending out all these tweets. I'm like, buy it now, buy it now, buy it now. And then lo and behold, like 3 days later, we started that leg up. That's still going.
That was incredibly valuable information to have at that time. I can confirm that because I was, you know, when all the subnets launched, right, we got all these dTAO tokens launched. I was aware of sort of what some of them were doing. It forced me to get a lot smarter, a lot faster. And it was hard to tell like who was real and who wasn't. It was a very chaotic era in the first couple of weeks. And you had a lot of voices saying, don't buy anything. It's too early. Yeah. And some of us were like, well, maybe that's wrong. Maybe this is the time to buy, right? So we were trying to figure out if we were going to buy, what we should buy. And we basically had a choice between 64 different things, and figuring, you know, sifting the wheat from the chaff and figuring out, you know, knowing that Chutes was like the one early. It wasn't obvious, you know, in those early couple weeks. Yeah, totally not. So basically getting that kind of signal that early on kind of insanely valuable, kind of like knowing about Bitcoin in 2013 or something like that, just on a compressed time frame, right? So, yeah.
And, I remember saying when I was sending out all these posts, I said, to those who really understand how these kinds of things work, you can use this tool really to your advantage because, especially this isn't like a 100K market cap like meme on Solana where, there's a bunch of different factors that could play into it. But, if you understand how these things work and how these phases go and, when supply changes hands, I was saying, if you understand this, you could use this really to your advantage. And like you said, in that beginning phase when nobody really knew how to play it, you had people telling you, oh my God, the root is going to drive this to zero before it actually starts taking off. Yeah. I'm sitting back here and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to be throwing my small amounts in like every so often and see how it plays out. And, lo and behold, I truthfully believe that a lot of those people who were saying, wait 2 months, wait until June, wait 6 months, wait until October for this to actually become something are, looking back on it and probably thinking to themselves, I probably should have been, buying these up when I was saying all these things.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And I think
fortune favored the bold for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, it's really cool now to watch too, the statistics and the charts on the APY for root versus the subnets, and just watching TAO leave root and going straight into these subnets is really I didn't think that would be happening for some time, but it's starting to come. And
the ratio is like 15% to 85%, something like that now, right?
Yeah.
Last time I looked. So 15% of TAO is in subnets and 85% is still in root. So it's mostly hanging out, kind of scared. But there'll be a moment where that flips, where it'll go the other way, or 15% is in root and 85% will be in subnets. But when that happens, that will be like a 6x just because of just because of TAO in the system kind of moving into subnets instead of being scared in root.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I tend sometimes to do like a little bit of wallet sleuthing, I guess you could call it, where I'll just go and I'll look and just check out to see what some of these guys who are holding 500,000 to like $1 million worth of TAO in their wallets. And a lot of times it's really funny to see they unstake from root and they're just doing 20% of their portfolio they're throwing into Chutes. The other 20% they're throwing into, Templar or Targon or any of these big names, because they know that, eventually what they're getting for staking in root is just down slowly. And what they're getting in subnets is just going up slowly. Obviously this isn't like me telling you go put money in there, but it's just what I've been noticing and seeing.
Yeah, same here, and experiencing. And fortune favors the bold, and I was bold. And I've noticed this pattern several times in crypto where, if it's early days and nobody knows what it is yet, but you have sort of an inkling that it's big, like Ethereum, like the Ethereum ICO was a fortune favors the bold thing, which I did participate in, but I wasn't bold enough by any stretch of the imagination. I should have been much bolder. And as Warren Buffett says, you want to basically invest in very few things, but when you have conviction, bet large. And because these things don't come along very often, right? And I hear Jason Calcana speak about his Uber investment, and he kicks himself because he didn't put in more, right? Mm-hmm. And that was like a once, that probably come a couple times in his lifetime, but that's kind of it, probably maybe 3 times. That's total over an entire lifetime. So when these opportunities come along, and I think they come along more often in crypto than in the equity world, but you still have to move fast and be bold. We didn't know whether dTAO was going to work, right? Like there were all kinds of uncertainties around it, right? Just like Ethereum, we didn't know whether this guy in Russia was actually going to deliver a blockchain, much less it was going to be a big one, right? So we just didn't know. But fortune does favor the bold. If you have conviction, then betting big is the way to be. So exactly. That's kind of what I've discovered. So that's what I bet big myself. So it has paid off.
No, so I agree.
Yeah. So let's talk about something else I discovered just last night. So shifting topics now. So I didn't know that you could So when you buy subnet alpha tokens from the Bittensor chain AMM using TAO, you get the subnet token, but it is automatically staked for you in one of the validators. Now you can choose which validator it gets staked in, but there is no such thing as an unstaked subnet token. It's always in a staked state with some validator, right? As far as I can tell, I've never seen an unstaked one, so I'm pretty sure it's always staked. As such, I did not think that you could transfer these staked subnet tokens between one wallet and another. I thought that was just impossible because I'm like, well, it's staked. You can't, how can you move it? And it turns out you can. And I don't know how it's possible, but I did find a tool on taostats.io, and it's sort of buried in there. You have to go digging around for it. But I did find a transfer utility, and I myself transferred my subnet tokens from one of my junk wallets to another one of my junk wallets, and it transferred the entire subnet token. So I transferred 10, and 10 tokens transferred to the other wallet. There was no slippage, so it wasn't like it was under the hood, unstaking it, trading it for TAO, and then rebuying it and putting it in the other wallet. That didn't happen because I would have seen slippage otherwise, right? I would have seen 9.9999 tokens instead of 10, right? Instead, the whole 10 moved over. So that tells me that these tokens are transferable. These subnet alpha tokens are transferable, which means something very important. It means that centralized exchanges can list subnet tokens, which I did not think was possible until last night. And we've now seen Kraken is validating. So I have a thesis. My thesis is that Kraken will list the first subnet alpha token. I'll bet it'll be Chutes. Again, this is not financial advice. It's my opinion. That's it. But this is what I think. It's my guess. Because they are interested. They are hip to this. And anytime there's volume rising up somewhere, the exchanges make money off of volume. So they want to sort of be the first one to skate to where the puck is going. What do you think of what I just said? Do you think I'm right? Or am I wrong? Tell me what you think.
No, I definitely think that you're right. And, I actually did not know that you could transfer between wallets. It's not something that I've tried to do yet. I do have a few wallets that I trade between, but I have one for my high convictions, and then I have one for the Shogun fund that I'm running, and then I have my wallet that I'm just taking bets on the lower caps that I think could whatever. But I haven't tried to do it yet. But I did not know this, and I was totally under the impression that you couldn't transfer the staked. But I think as I've poked around in the BT CLI and the whole back end SDK with this whole thing, there's a bunch that you can actually do under the hood. And I didn't know it until I started, browsing through this documentation. But finding out about it doesn't surprise me as much as I think that it would have 2 weeks ago. And just also now seeing what I didn't know too, you could do on TAO stats or just in general was you could swap validators without actually selling the tokens.
Yes, I just discovered that too.
Yeah, so there's a lot that you could do under the hood that isn't, accessible to the broader eye when you look at these things.
Yeah.
But it's pretty neat actually. But to your point about the exchanges, I'm in full agreement. And that is the first thing I thought when I saw that the news broke that they were becoming a validator was they're listing something and they want to front run every single other person and every single other exchange that's going to do this. And they want to be the first and they want their validator because that they know that they are one, going to charge a swap fee, and two, that they're going to make money off being validators. So it's kind of like a double win for them. And I think that, if they start doing that and if they start listing tokens, alpha tokens on their exchanges, then we should start to see some others come in. And, that could eventually blow this to the mainstream. So
absolutely. No, I actually thought that somebody figuring out how to do wrapped subnet tokens on Solana so that you could just use Sol and, buy Chutes and, never have to dick around with TAO or the Bittensor chain at all. Not even really understand anything, just buy the token, collect the rewards, but mostly bet on the token appreciation and, own a piece of Chutes while it's going up in price. And I do think that world is coming. I think there's a way to, I know how it would work in my mind if I were going to build it. So if I can see it in my head, I'm sure there's 20 other people that see it in theirs, and some of them are building it. And I know of several attempts. And so I know it's coming, but I thought that was going to be the world that was going to erupt first, and it might not be. It might be this centralized exchange world. It might be Kraken. I do know that Binance, and I'll tell a story very quickly. Back in the early days of NEO, they listed NEO, and they allowed anyone who held NEO up on the Binance exchange to collect the gas token, which emitted into any wallet which held NEO. There was no sort of, you didn't have to claim it or anything. It just showed up in your wallet. Every block, like a little bit more popped in, right? So it's very much like Subnet token TAO emissions, right? Or alpha token emissions, just sort of popping into your wallet as they're emitted from the chain. If a centralized exchange, because Binance did that, they actually allowed people who held NEO on the exchange to collect their gas, and no other exchange did. All the other exchanges were like, oh, if you hold NEO on our exchange, screw you, we're keeping your gas, you don't get it. Everybody just went over to Binance, and it was in fact the feature, specifically the feature that they added that made Binance so popular and so powerful. That was it. Mm-hmm. That was the move. And I got that directly from CZ. I was in the audience in Singapore while he was talking about this in like 2019. So, according to CZ, this is what made Binance. So I think there's a similar opportunity to not only list subnet tokens, but to provide the emissions to any holders that are, keeping their subnet tokens up on the exchange. So yeah, this could be pretty big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And, it's really too just plays back to like the whole thing you said with how they were the ones giving it the emissions to the actual people holding. I think that, if Kraken or if any of the other big exchanges take that opportunity and they could bring this to light and because I don't know if you feel the same, but I feel like this whole TAO ecosystem and, all the people that are regularly talking about it and active in these chats and on Twitter it's kind of, it's like a small bubble almost.
It is.
I feel. And, it's not going to be that way forever. And I know that, and I'm very confident in that. But I feel like the one entity that pops that bubble and, kind of brings it out to everybody will be the one that benefits from it the most. And yeah.
Totally agree. Whoever gets here first is gonna have a giant meal, and it's gonna be an exchange, whether it's a decentralized exchange or a centralized one. Somebody's gonna be the big winner here. It looks like Kraken. It looks like it's gonna be Kraken. So I've been poking the Winklevi. One of them follows me on X, so I've been sort of poking them, saying, "Hey, you guys need to list TAO," because they don't even list TAO yet. Kraken at least lists TAO. And I remember the last time, so I did poke Tyler Winklevoss. He's the one twin that I don't have both twins. I only have one. So, but he follows me on X, and I was like, "Hey, so you guys going to list TAO?" And he just responded with a smiley. So that was so that generally means something positive. My guess is that the only reason they haven't yet is because New York is sort of all over them, even though the SEC is not. Probably the state of New York has got all kinds of insane requirements that maybe TAO qualifies as a security in their stupid brains for reasons that make no sense to, except if you're one of those idiotic bit license people in the state of New York, it makes sense to you. But other than that, it's just insane. But the Winklevi are in New York, so they have to obey the insane laws. Might be the only reason why they're not getting listed there. But I think the Winklevi get this. So I think they'll overcome it at some point and list this, and I think Coinbase and all the other guys are gonna do it. I'm pretty sure. So,
yeah, it actually did. I think it is tradable on Coinbase.
It is. Yes, I know, which is amazing, right? So that says to me that subnet tokens will be tradable on Coinbase soon, also. So we have a very interesting world right ahead of us. So okay, Nick, we are at the hour mark. So let's wrap it up here. What do you want to plug? Where can people find SwordScan? Where can they find you on X? All that stuff. Go for it.
So my X handle is Laz_ETH, and you can check out SwordScan for yourself at swordscan.com. Outstanding.
Well, thank you for spending some time with us. Very, very educational hour. So I personally thank you. I'm a fan of your product. I use your product. We met because I was, basically saying, is somebody going to do like a cookie for which was sort of a similar product for the virtuals and that universe? Is like, somebody going to do this for Bittensor TAO? And you're like, yeah, dude, I did it. Here's a link. I went there. I was like, holy shit, he did do it. So congratulations, you got there first, and I applaud what you're doing, and I really like it. So, all right, dude. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This has been Hash Rate. See y'all next time.